Dwight David Eisenhower was born on October 14, 1890, in Denison, Texas, to David and Ida Eisenhower. He grew up in a poor family and was the third of 7 children. His early life was marked by a strong work ethic and a sense of responsibility instilled by his parents. Eisenhower's family moved to Abilene, Kansas, when he was a young child, and it was here that he spent most of his formative years. He graduated from Abilene High School in 1909 and later attended the United States Military Academy at West Point, where he graduated in 1915, ranked 61st in his class of 164. After completing his education, Eisenhower was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army. His early military career involved a variety of assignments, including serving in the Philippines, where he gained valuable experience that would later shape his leadership style. During World War I, Eisenhower did not see combat but served in various star positions in the United States. He spent a significant portion of the war training troops in the States, which allowed him to hone his organizational and administrative skills. By the end of the war, he had earned a reputation as a capable officer with potential for higher leadership roles. After World War I, Eisenhower continued to rise through the ranks of the Army. He worked as an aide to General Douglas MacArthur in the 1930s, which gave him exposure to the high levels of military strategy and command. Eisenhower's reputation for competence and attention to detail helped him garner respect within the military community. During this time, he also served in various command and staff positions, including in the U.S. Army War Plans Division, where he was involved in the planning of military operations for the coming global conflict. By the late 1930s, Eisenhower had become a seasoned military strategist, but his rise to prominence occurred with the outbreak of World War II. When the United States entered World War II after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, Eisenhower was appointed as a major general. His early assignments involved planning for the eventual American involvement in Europe. In 1942, he was promoted to lieutenant general and took on the role of commanding the U.S. Army in the European theater of operations. As the war escalated, Eisenhower's role grew significantly, culminating in his appointment as the Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force in 1943. In this position, he was responsible for coordinating the military efforts of the United States, Great Britain, and other Allied nations. Eisenhower's leadership during World War II was marked by his strategic acumen and his ability to maintain unity among the often divergent interests of the Allied nations. One of his most notable achievements was overseeing the successful planning and execution of Operation Overlord, the D-Day invasion of Normandy, on June 6, 1944. This operation marked the turning point of the war in Europe, and Eisenhower's role in its success cemented his place in history as a master tactician and a unifying figure. After the Allied victory in Europe, Eisenhower was hailed as a hero. In 1945, he was promoted to the rank of 5-star general, a distinction that placed him among the highest military officers in the United States. Following the war, Eisenhower served as a military governor of Germany before returning to the United States in 1948. He later became the president of Columbia University in New York City, where he was involved in a number of educational and administrative duties, but his time in academia was brief. In 1952, Eisenhower entered the political arena, running for president as a Republican candidate. His campaign was centered on the promise to bring stability and leadership to a nation still reeling from the aftermath of the Korean War and the tensions of the Cold War. Eisenhower won the election and was inaugurated as the 34th President of the United States on January 20, 1953. During his 2 terms in office, he focused on a range of issues, including the containment of communism, the development of the interstate highway system, and the expansion of Social Security. He also oversaw a period of relative peace and prosperity in the United States, while handling complexities of the Cold War and the growing threat of nuclear weapons. Eisenhower's foreign policy was heavily shaped by the Cold War. He sought to contain the spread of communism through various means, including the use of military alliances such as NATO and economic assistance programs like the Marshall Plan. He also confronted the Soviet Union in a series of high-stakes confrontations, including the Korean War and the Suez Crisis. His administration worked to strengthen American influence in global affairs while trying to avoid direct military confrontation with the Soviet Union. In his second term, Eisenhower continued his efforts to reduce tensions with the Soviet Union, famously meeting with Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev in 1959. However, He also faced challenges such as the launch of the Soviet satellite Sputnik, which sparked fears of a missile gap between the two superpowers. To address these concerns, Eisenhower pushed for greater investment in the U.S. space program and emphasized the importance of technological superiority. Eisenhower was also concerned about domestic issues during his presidency. He supported the civil rights movement but was cautious in his approach, initially advocating for a gradual approach to integration. His administration took significant steps, including sending federal troops to enforce school desegregation in Little Rock, Arkansas, in 1957. However, Eisenhower's legacy on civil rights remains a subject of debate, as his approach was seen by some as too conservative and reluctant in comparison to the more radical actions that followed in the 1960s. After leaving office in 1961, Eisenhower retired to his farm in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. He remained an influential figure in American politics and international affairs, offering advice to later presidents and continuing to speak out on issues he felt were important, such as the military-industrial complex. In his farewell address in January 1961, he famously warned against the undue influence of the military-industrial complex on American policy, a statement that resonated with many in subsequent decades. Eisenhower passed away on March 28, 1969, at the age of 78, after suffering a heart attack. He left behind a legacy of military and political leadership that shaped the course of the 20th century. As one of the most respected and admired figures in American history, Dwight D. Eisenhower's impact on both military strategy and political leadership continues to be felt to this day. Eisenhower's legacy is multifaceted and far-reaching, encompassing not only his military achievements but also his contributions to American society and global diplomacy. His leadership during World War II was instrumental in securing Allied victory, and his ability to navigate the complex political landscape of the Cold War set the tone for U.S. foreign policy for decades. As president, he oversaw a period of economic prosperity, advanced civil rights initiatives, and maintained a steady hand in managing the nuclear arms race, all while fostering a sense of national unity. His post-presidential years were marked by a deep engagement with both the American public and global affairs. He continued to be a strong voice on political matters, providing counsel to future presidents and offering a thoughtful perspective on the challenges of governance. Despite his retirement from active political life, Eisenhower remained involved in public life, advising on military and diplomatic issues and maintaining a strong public presence. In the years following his death, historians and scholars have continued to assess his contributions, weighing his military genius against his political conservatism. Some see him as a moderate force in a turbulent era, able to balance military strength with diplomatic restraint. Others focus on his more cautious domestic policy on civil rights, recognizing that while he took action, he did so with deliberate restraint. His presidency is often remembered for his call for peace and stability, while his warnings about the influence of the military-industrial complex have gained increasing relevance in the modern world. Eisenhower's leadership in World War II left an indelible mark on military history. His strategic vision and ability to bring together diverse Allied forces in a coordinated effort were key to the success of D-Day and subsequent military operations. His understanding of logistics, command structure, and inter-Allied cooperation remains a model for military commanders worldwide. As Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, he demonstrated a keen sense of diplomacy, balancing the needs and priorities of the United States, Great Britain, and other allies in a time of unprecedented global conflict. While Eisenhower's presidency is often remembered for the era of relative peace and prosperity that he presided over, it was not without its challenges. Domestically, he worked to expand the role of the federal government in areas such as education, healthcare, and infrastructure, leaving behind a legacy of public works, most notably the interstate highway system, which transformed transportation in the United States. His presidency marked a turning point in how Americans view their relationship with government and its role in shaping society. In terms of foreign policy, Eisenhower was instrumental in defining the U.S. approach to the Cold War, navigating a complex and often perilous international landscape. His policies of containment, including his support for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, and economic assistance programs like the Marshall Plan, helped to rebuild war-torn Europe and prevent the spread of communism. However, his administration also saw the rise of military interventions in places like Korea, Vietnam, and the Middle East, which will become defining issues for future generations of Americans. Despite these challenges, his ability to manage relations with both the Soviet Union and China contributed to a period of relative stability during the early Cold War years. Eisenhower's presidency also marked a shift in the American approach to civil rights. While his actions were sometimes seen as cautious and incremental, they represented a crucial step forward in addressing racial inequality. His decision to send federal troops to enforce the desegregation of Little Rock Central High School in 1957 was a pivotal moment in the civil rights struggle, and it demonstrated his willingness to intervene to uphold the rule of law, even when it was politically difficult. After his death, Eisenhower's legacy continued to resonate in American politics. His pragmatic approach to leadership, focus on national unity, and commitment to balanced decision-making served as a model for future political leaders. His contributions to both military strategy and American governance ensured that his name will be remembered as one of the most significant figures of the 20th century. In addition to his direct contributions, the institutions that bear his name, such as the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum in Abilene, Kansas, serve as lasting tributes to his achievements. These institutions, along with his extensive writings and speeches, continue to offer valuable insights into his thinking on leadership, governance, and the global challenges of his time. Dwight D. Eisenhower remains one of the most influential figures in American history, a man whose military prowess, political acumen, and commitment to public service shaped the course of the 20th century and left a lasting impact on the world. Eisenhower's post-presidential influence continued to be felt throughout the latter half of the 20th century. While no longer in office, he remained active in advising future presidents, particularly on matters of military and foreign policy. His experiences in both World War II and the Cold War gave him a unique perspective on global conflicts, and his cautionary advice on the dangers of nuclear escalation and military overreach was echoed in the speeches and policies of later presidents, especially during times of heightened tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. In the 1960s, Eisenhower was deeply concerned with the growing polarization in American politics. As a man who had come of age in a more unified America, he expressed alarm at the ideological divisions and social unrest that seemed to be sweeping the country. In particular, he was worried about the increasing influence of special interest groups and the way that American political discourse was becoming more extreme. His reflections on these issues, often delivered in private conversations and through his writings, underscored his belief in moderation and the importance of pragmatic, solutions-oriented leadership. Eisenhower's legacy in military affairs remained particularly influential in the post-war years. As a five-star general, he had not only navigated the complexities of commanding the Allied forces during World War II, but also shaped modern military strategies. His leadership and his ability to manage large, multinational forces set the groundwork for the development of NATO as a major force in global security. His understanding of military alliances and international cooperation was essential in forging the post-war security order, which provided stability for Europe and much of the Western world throughout the Cold War. Furthermore, his administration's emphasis on maintaining a strong military deterrent, especially in the form of nuclear weapons, helped to define U.S. military strategy for decades. He presided over the early years of the arms race with the Soviet Union, but he was also a proponent of arms control, recognizing the catastrophic potential of nuclear war. This balance between military strength and diplomacy became a hallmark of his tenure and influenced his successors, who continued to grapple with the nuclear question for much of the Cold War. In domestic affairs, Eisenhower's legacy was characterized by his emphasis on infrastructure and public works. His championing of the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 led to the creation of the Interstate Highway System, which remains one of the most significant accomplishments in American infrastructure. This project revolutionized transportation in the United States, contributed to the nation's economic growth, and reshaped American society, making suburbanization and long-distance travel more accessible to millions of Americans. Eisenhower's focus on infrastructure was not just about roads, but about fostering a more connected and efficient nation. In education, Eisenhower's presidency also had lasting effects, as he continued to advocate for improved educational standards, particularly in science and mathematics, in response to the Soviet Union's launch of Sputnik. His administration's efforts led to increased funding for education and the establishment of a federal commitment to technological innovation. Eisenhower believed that fostering an educated, well-trained workforce was key to maintaining American competitiveness on the world stage. Eisenhower's approach to civil rights remains a complex and debated aspect of his presidency. While his early stance was more cautious compared to the actions of later presidents, he nevertheless played a pivotal role in advancing civil rights. His decision to send federal troops to Little Rock, Arkansas, in 1957 was a defining moment, demonstrating his commitment to enforcing the law and supporting school desegregation. He also signed the Civil Rights Act of 1957, which created the Civil Rights Commission, marking the first civil rights legislation passed since Reconstruction. However, his actions were often more restrained compared to those of Lyndon B. Johnson and other civil rights advocates who came later, leading some to view him as less proactive on racial equality. Eisenhower's presidency was also marked by his skill in managing Cold War tensions. He was careful to avoid full-scale war with the Soviet Union, opting instead for a strategy of containment through diplomacy, economic assistance, and military alliances. His administration's focus on massive retaliation and the use of nuclear deterrence was designed to prevent Soviet aggression without engaging in direct conflict. He believed that the United States should be prepared to respond to Soviet threats with overwhelming force, but he also sought to reduce the likelihood of war through armed control agreements like the Atoms for Peace initiative. Eisenhower's farewell address in 1961 remains one of his most significant and prescient moments. In it, he famously warned of the undue influence of the military-industrial complex, a term he coined to describe the growing relationship between the military establishment and the defense industry. Eisenhower expressed concern that the United States, with its vast military power and a growing defense industry, could fall into a pattern of over-reliance on military solutions to global problems. His warning continues to be cited today, especially in discussions about the balance between defense spending, diplomacy, and national priorities. Throughout his life, Eisenhower was known for his steady demeanor, sense of duty, and ability to bring people together. His leadership style, which combined a sense of discipline with a genuine concern for the welfare of the nation, helped guide the United States through some of the most challenging times in its history. Despite facing criticism for his more cautious approach to certain domestic and foreign issues, Eisenhower's overall impact was one of moderation, pragmatism, and stability. His legacy as both a military leader and a statesman has left a lasting imprint on American political and military history. In summary, Dwight D. Eisenhower's life was defined by a commitment to service, leadership, and a deep sense of responsibility to his country. His achievements in World War II, his presidency, and his enduring influence on global politics and military strategy continue to be studied and admired. Whether navigating the complex geopolitics of the Cold War, overseeing transformative domestic policies, or offering wisdom to future generations of leaders, Eisenhower's legacy is one of enduring significance, reflecting the character and principles that shaped him throughout his life.